Well, I will get the recording started.
I can see that.
Welcome everyone to this week 4 kickoff conversation. I'm really pleased to be joined by Kathleen Blake Yancey, who's the Kellogg W. Hunt Professor of English and Distinguished Research Professor at Florida State University. You probably know, even if you're new to ePortfolios, that Kathy has done tons of work around ePortfolios. And in the context of our weaving it together, she's going to speak to some of the themes that we've been exploring over this month, paying particular attention to reflection. So welcome, Kathy. So great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Tracy, and thank you for the lovely introduction. And really thank you and Kevin and Helen and Candace for your good work the whole month. It's just been great. I've been sampling, dipping my toe in, as it were, throughout the month, and it's just really smart and really interesting. So kudos to you all. A full month, it's huge. So I'm happy to be with everybody today. I'm going to think with us a little bit about reflection, and reflection providing a through line through 3 different moments that teach us something about portfolios done well, portfolios engaging in high impact practices, although they are one themselves, they obviously can house and prompt high impact practices, also involving other stakeholders. So I want to begin by thinking about a practice that we engaged in when I was at Clemson. And this would have been around 2004, 2005. I was working with the Health Sciences Department at Clemson. They have about 400 majors. And all the students there have to do an internship. And in that major, they're preparing to do any number of things. They may want to be doctors, they may want to be diet counselors, or actually, as it turned out, they may decide to do something else with their lives. The internship there was definitely influential. Under the leadership of Kathleen Meyer, the portfolio that was introducing the students to their internship was radically revised. It had been a very large 3-ring binder with all the paper you can imagine in it. And what we didn't know at the time is that the preceptors didn't even look at it because it was unmanageable. It wasn't sculpted to the purpose. I mean, it didn't seem to have any utility to them. So Kathleen and I worked together to revise it so that it was an electronic portfolio, so that it was targeted to the internship that the students were going to undertake. And the reflection questions asked them about that as well. So it was really designed then as a tool to socialize students into the internship. I will say that at the outset that the internship preceptors came together every year. And so our plan was to introduce them to this new portfolio. And what I started to say was, I'm showing my hand up like I'm taking an oath or something, but I was scared to death that the internship preceptors were going to say, oh, that's a bad idea. Or we would show them the questions and say, oh, the portfolio is fine, but we don't really want the reflection. I just had a lot of anxiety about this. And as it turned out, they were our best friends. They loved it because they had seen what we had not really, that the other portfolio, the earlier one, was not very useful. They saw that this one would be terrifically useful and would help them socialize the students into the internship. And that's in fact the way it happened. What also happened was in the portfolio changed too, because the students were expected at the end of the internship to come back to the portfolio and sort of finish out the portfolio story. So the message there for me was do good work, take the risk, count on people to help you. So that was one moment where we engaged other stakeholders in a way that I think benefited the major, the internship preceptors, but mostly the students. The second moment is really a story about the unintended consequences that I think are good that happen in our work with ePortfolios. I've talked some and I've written about an ePortfolio course that I created here at FSU. It's in the book that I edited on ePortfolios as curriculum, and it's a 1-credit course, and it's intended for graduate students in a rhetoric and comp program. And those students are MA students, they're PhD students, they're doing lots of different things. They might be creating a portfolio just because they want to track their own progress in the program. Some of them create portfolios to apply for a teaching award. Some of them are looking for jobs. Master's students are looking for jobs in tech writing. Other PhD students are looking for jobs in the academic market. So it really varies by design, and that's perfectly fine. My experience with the course has been pretty positive. I not only help students create the portfolio that they want to create, really by staging a number of workshops, um, but also help them think at the end through some reflective questions about what they might have learned about portfolios themselves, because all of them are TAs for us. So it's got a kind of, double-edged purpose to it. So fast forward, I get an email in the fall from a former student of ours who graduated, 5 or 6 years ago now. She's out in the Western United States. She's directing a writing program, and she's working with her colleagues on a writing portfolio there. I might have anticipated that, but that's not why she was writing me. She was writing me because she found herself working with high school teachers who were working with ePortfolios with their students. And they wanted their portfolios not to duplicate what the college portfolios were doing, but to align with them. And she had a lot of work to do. For one thing, the model that they were working in, the students would create these really interesting portfolios, and the teachers would only read the last essay. So like, ethically, do you think that's a good idea? Maybe not. So the question she was putting to me was, could I help her think about what options might be available for these teachers? Because if they started evaluating the whole portfolio, they would ask very different reflective questions. So I did. I Zoomed in. This was a pre-pandemic Zoom. Zoomed in and basically outlined, I can't tell them what to do because I don't live there. I have no idea. It's presumptuous. But I can outline some options. And that's what I did. And turns out they did what people do. They found 2 that they liked, and they sort of cobbled them together, and they're really happy. Then she writes me back. Now we're in the pandemic, and she writes me late in the spring, and now they're ready to look at assessment. So she wants to look at scoring guides. What she wants to look at, some that are holistic, some that are analytic, and think a little bit about pluses and minuses before she shares them with the teachers. All of which is my long-winded way of saying that now, what happened? I have a person who's working with high school teachers and college teachers, all on writing, changing their portfolio practices for the good with them, not for them, and all because she took an ePortfolio class with me 7 years ago. Not what I planned for it to do, but it's done these other good things. And I think that happens a lot. I'm not a huge fan of surveillance of a Foucaultian kind. We shouldn't look at everything all the time. But we might do a better job of looking at some of these unintended consequences, especially when they're positive. And this was definitely one. This was not the purpose of the course, but it's a big benefit. And I'll bet you there are other benefits going on. I just haven't had the time to track them down. So that's a second moment. So a third moment comes out of our editing, writing, and media major here at FSU. We rolled that major out about 2010. It's a very popular major. It's the most popular major in the English department. It's got about 700 students. The major requires that the students complete an internship. And the internship is often taken in the junior year, sometimes in the senior year. And I had a hand in creating the major. It's an interdisciplinary major. But we have an internship coordinator who's perfectly capable, and that's her responsibility. I work with some undergraduates in some different kinds of capacities, and in the course of that, had looked at a couple of models. I also had looked at the models we had on the web, just in connection to the program. And I have to tell you, the reflection was pretty underwhelming. It's not. So here's what a reflection would look like. And I looked them up this morning to make sure I was remembering correctly, and alas, I was. So, I did my internship at name of place. It was really cool. I spent most of my days doing X, Y, and Z. I learned pretty much, students, fellow students, you will love your internship too. End of story. I mean, it just was not reflective. It was a lot of descriptions, some context setting, and then a promo at the end. It was a mixed genre, okay, in the English world, okay. It was a promo at the end, I think that was actually the sort of the tipping point for me. So I went to our internship coordinator, Molly Hand, and said, she's the one who's in control of this, so I don't have any authority here. And I said, what do you think? Can we take another look at this? I mean, unless you think this is really what you think it should do. If this is what you really think it should do, then I need to find another project. And Lord knows there are plenty, so that's not a problem. She said, no, it's really not doing what we had hoped it would do. And I thought, yeah, right. So we worked together and we revised it. I don't think it's perfect, but it's so much better. And it's because we decided what it was we wanted to know. I think a lot of times we design reflection questions, and I think in an impulse to be open and engaging and interested in everything that students know, we just sort of make it either really open or really tied to outcomes. And I would suggest that when it's too open, students really don't know what you want. And I think it's partly because you either haven't decided what you wanted or you haven't made it clear to students. And although reflection, there's evidence to show that reflection linked to outcomes can actually produce better student learning, no question, it's not a bad thing. It's also pretty limited. And it also, it really puts students in the position of having to argue if they've achieved the outcomes, whether they have or not. So that's an ethical issue that we might take up at some point. But in any event, I'm really much more interested in meaningfulness. So what meaning have you made of this internship? What and how is it meaningful? You're an editing, writing, and media major. What have you learned about writing? How does what you learned about writing compare with what you learned about writing on campus? How does what you've learned about writing set you up for what you'll do in the future? And those are, I have the questions before me. Those are literally the questions. And I'm doing something of a small study looking at these now because we're done with the first year of the new reflections. And while they're not perfect, they're so much better because students are telling you, it's very interesting. Some of them draw very nice comparisons between what they did on campus and what they did in the internships. And other students did not. Found that there's a pretty big divide here. But what's interesting is that almost to a person, they say that the internship writing was different because it was more challenging, but it gave them more autonomy. And they really liked that. The other thing is that the internships, almost to a person, gave them more creativity. So they felt that they could really bring their creativity to the writing tasks. And the other thing that's interesting is that almost all of them, again, by the end, are concluding by saying, I have my next internship set up. Our students do more than one internship, but it's not required. Or I have been able to parlay this internship into a job. So there's a kind of linkage there that we didn't see in a single one of the other ones. So this was an interesting exercise because we didn't have to change it. The program was doing, by all accounts, the program does very well. The students are happy. Why, if it's not broken, why tinker with it? But I would suggest that when we looked at it, it really was broken. It really wasn't doing what we thought it should do. And now we have evidence that what you ask for indeed is what you'll get. This is not really news, but it does mean that we have a much better model for students, a much better model for the program, and something that, by the way, we can learn from as well. Again, not the purpose. The purpose is not to assign reflection to make us better as program leaders or faculty members or staff members, but that's a benefit because now systematically we can go back and look and see where the connections worked and where they did not. So my sense is that we're doing a lot of good work here, and we have been. If I go back to 2016, which is 16 years ago, but there's still a lot of good work to be done. And with that, I would thank you for the invitation. It's always fun to have an invitation to talk about things I care about, and I hope that this will be useful.
I think it will. Thank you so much. It just reinforces for me that reflection is so at the heart of what we do with ePortfolio, and that as we're all thinking about how do we weave things together in our own context, really taking that time and space to reflect on the practices, the stakeholders we're engaging, the ethics behind it, and the kinds of high impact practices we're trying to design, I think is so crucial to the whole process. So
that's right. We could have a tagline here: reflection, it's not for students only.
Yeah. I love that. Well, we will leave it on that really smart note. Thank you so much, Kathy. And just a
Thank you.
quick plug also that you'll be joining our Stylist Authors panel this week to speak a little bit about your book, ePortfolio as Curriculum. So we'll look forward to seeing you there as well. Thanks
Me too.
so
I
much.
hope I see other people this week at other events.
You will. You will. Thanks so much. Take care.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.